Let's dive in. We'll start with the really pressing issues, the stuff from 2024. Anthropology has to keep pace with a changing world, right? First question. Discuss the contemporary challenges in fieldwork method in anthropological research from 2024.
Okay, yeah. Fieldwork is still absolutely core to anthropology. But, the world itself has changed so much. The biggest challenge, I'd say, is ethics and informed consent.
How so?
Well, think about studying in a place with clear hierarchies, like a caste-based village, which M.N. Srinivas wrote about, the power difference there. It makes you wonder if consent can ever be truly voluntary.
Right. People might feel pressured to agree.
Precisely. And the data itself is often really sensitive. Andre Bataille really hammered this home. Confidentiality isn't just nice to have. It's absolutely crucial. You have to protect people from potential backlash based on what they shared.
That sounds incredibly complex. You need them to talk freely, but talking freely could put them at risk.
Okay, what else is challenging fieldwork now?
Well, there's globalization and mobility. It's not like you can just study one single isolated village anymore. S.C. Dube pointed this out years ago. Global media alone changes local cultures constantly.
And people move around more, too.
Right.
Exactly. Migration fragments communities. Jan Bremen's work on mobile laborers show this clearly. The community might exist across several places at once. So anthropologists now need multi-sited perspectives. You're not studying a place, you're tracking connections, flows, like Amita Bhaviskar did following social movements.
So let me ask you, the listener, how would you even begin to study a community that lives half in one country, half in another? That's the challenge right there.
And then there's technology. It's unavoidable. We've got drones, GIS for mapping space in new ways, and smartphones. They generate endless data, leading to whole new fields like ethnography.
Plus, recent events forced a big change too.
Oh, definitely. Health and safety. The COVID-19 pandemic basically fast-tracked the move towards virtual or remote methods. Sometimes it was the only option.
Okay, one more big concept, reflexivity. What does that actually mean on the ground?
Reflexivity is fundamentally about the researcher questioning their own position, their biases, their influence on the situation. It's acknowledging that you, the researcher, are part of the social setting you're studying.
So not pretending to be an invisible fly on the wall.
Exactly. And this thinking leads naturally towards things like collaborative ethnography. That's where the community members aren't just subjects. They actually help analyze the data, shape the interpretation. It's about sharing power, really.
That's a great setup for the modern landscape. Let's move straight to the second topic from 2024, which is super practical. Discuss the applicability of various sampling techniques in selecting the study group. How do you choose who to talk to?
Right. Sampling. It's crucial because it's how you connect your deep, focused study to a broader population. You're always balancing depth with, representativeness.
So what are the main techniques?
Well, if you need stats, you lean towards probability sampling. Simple random sampling is one way. Basically, everyone has an equal chance of being picked. LP Vidyarthi used this for large surveys of the Malur tribe. Good for breadth.
But maybe it misses key groups.
It can, yeah. So if you know there are important subgroups, say, based on caste or gender, you might use stratified sampling. You make sure your sample reflects the proportions of those groups in the actual population. S.C. Dew did this, and Evans Pritchard thought about newer lineages this way too. You just need a good list to start with.
Okay, but what if you're not doing a big survey? What if you need specific knowledge or need to reach people who are hard to find?
And then you shift to non-probability methods. These prioritize depth. Purposive sampling is where you deliberately choose specific people because of their knowledge or role your key informants. Think of Evans Pritchard specifically seeking out Azande witch doctors.
The downside being,
You get amazing insight, but you can't really generalize those findings statistically to the whole population. And for really hidden or sensitive groups like survivors of violence, snowball sampling is often vital. You ask initial contacts to refer you to others. Veena Das relied on this.
but that could lead you down one specific path, right? Network bias.
Exactly. You have to be aware of that limitation. Really, the best approach often mixes things, maybe a survey for breadth, combined with purposive interviews for depth.
Makes sense, a toolkit approach.
Precisely. So we've gathered all this rich, messy data notes, recordings. Now what? Let's jump to 2023. The question is, describe various methods of qualitative data analysis. Highlight some popular computer softwares used in qualitative analysis. How do we find the meaning in it all?
Right, qualitative analysis. It's basically about spotting patterns in words and stories, yeah. I guess the most common one is thematic analysis.
That's usually the starting point. You read through everything, looking for recurring ideas, topics, concerns, themes. Like M.N. Srinivas identifying that pattern of lower castes adopting upper caste practices and calling it Sanskritization. That's a theme emerging for the data.
Okay, so finding repeats. What else?
There's grounded theory. This is more. Bottom up. You try not to start with a pre-existing theory. Instead, you constantly compare bits of data, an interview here, an observation there, and let the concepts or theories emerge from the data itself. Andre Bataille's work often reflects this, letting the village structure reveal itself.
Letting the data speak first. Interesting. What about focusing on stories people tell?
That's narrative analysis. You look at how people structure their life stories. The plot, the characters, the turning points. Verrier Elwin did this when presenting tribal autobiographies. And then there's discourse analysis, which zooms in on language itself, how power relations are encoded in the way people talk or in official documents.
Managing all this manually sounds daunting,
Yeah,
especially with lots of interviews.
it is. That's why software is essential now. For managing huge amounts of text, anthropologists use tools like NVivo. It's great for coding text, finding themes. Then there's atlas.ti, which helps you visually map out the connections between different concepts you're finding.
Any others?
MXQDA is another popular one, especially good if you have both qualitative text data and quantitative survey data, because it helps you integrate them.
Okay, super helpful. Let's shift gears again back to methods, but focusing on participation. This is from 2022. Participatory Rural Appraisal, PRA, and Participatory Learning and Action, PLA.
Yes, PRA and PLA. These really represent a philosophical shift. Robert Chambers famously talked about handing over the stick, basically, putting the community's knowledge and priorities first, not the outside experts.
So, empowering the community, what's the actual difference between PRA and PLA?
They have different aims. PRA, Participatory Rural Appraisal, is generally for rapid assessment and planning. You might use quick tools like community mapping or ranking problems. The output is usually a specific, often one-off, local action plan.
Like a quick diagnostic?
Sort of, yeah. PLA, Participatory Learning and Action, is different. It aims for ongoing, cyclical learning and action. The tools might be things like seasonal calendars or trend analysis, which get revisited. It's about continuous adaptation and learning with the community.
So let's ask you again, listener. If you needed to make a plan for managing local water resources, would you go for the quick PRA plan or the ongoing PLA process? Depends on the goal, right?
Exactly. Now, let's zoom way out. Still in 2022, the question is, write the historical development of fieldwork tradition in anthropology till recent times. How did we even get here?
The origin story, where does it start?
It starts, frankly, pretty badly. In the 19th century, you had the Armchair Phase. Scholars in Europe reading reports from missionaries, travelers, colonial officials, very secondhand, often biased.
Right, not exactly getting their hands dirty.
Not at all. Then came figures like Franz Boas, who insisted on firsthand observation, learn the language, live there, understand the culture on its own terms, cultural relativism. That was a huge step.
But the real game changer was
The participant observation revolution, spearheaded by Malinowski, living in the Trobriand Islands for years, participating, observing, taking meticulous notes, that became the gold standard.
and it just stayed like that.
Not quite. From the 1960s to 80s, there was the reflexive turn. Thinkers like Clifford Geertz emphasized thick description, understanding layers of meaning. And feminist scholars, among others, really pushed anthropologists to confront their own biases, their positionality, the power dynamics of research.
Leading to where we are now.
Yes, the contemporary phase,
Yeah.
multi-sited fieldwork, digital methods, collaborative approaches.
Okay.
It's still evolving.
Okay, history covered. Now for the nitty-gritty tools. From 2021. Discuss various tools of data collection in conducting anthropological research. What's actually in the anthropologist's bag?
Well, the key is usually combining tools for validity, what we call triangulation. But the absolute cornerstone, the defining method, is participant observation, PO. That long-term immersion, living with people, keeping detailed daily journals, Malinowski, Srinivas, they exemplified this.
So deep hanging out, basically. What else?
Lots. Interviews are crucial. They can be structured, semi-structured, totally open-ended. Great for getting narratives, perspectives. Then you have tools for more systematic data, schedules and questionnaires. These give you comparable data, often quantitative. Bataille used these effectively to study social stratification.
What about understanding family and social structure?
That's where the genealogical method comes in. You map out kinship, descent, marriage ties, really pioneered by Rivers, used powerfully by people like Fortes to understand politics and inheritance.
And for individual stories or specific situations.
You've got life history or oral history to capture personal experiences over time. And the case study method lets you do a deep dive into one specific event, person, or place to understand broader processes. Like Shaw's study of that Naxalite village, an intense focus to get at the dynamics of conflict.
Seems like a lot already. Anything else?
Oh yeah. There's mapping and transect walks, literally walking and recording to understand spatial layouts and resource use. Focus group discussions, FGDs, are great for getting at group norms and shared opinions, often used in health research. Don't forget digging through secondary sources like archives, historical records, and of course the newer digital and mobile methods, studying online communities, using mobile tech for data collection, like ethnography of big workers as a big toolkit.
It really is. Okay, let's shift from doing the research to writing it. From 2020, a specific concept. Experimental ethnography. What's that about?
Experimental ethnography emerged mainly in the 1980s during that crisis of representation we touched on. It was a reaction against the traditional way of writing ethnography, which often presented the anthropologist as this invisible, objective authority and kind of silenced the people being studied.
So how did they experiment? What did they do differently?
They tried different writing techniques, things like polyphonic text, where you include multiple voices, maybe even conflicting perspectives, side by side, without one authoritative narrator smoothing it all over. Or autoethnography, where the researcher explicitly includes their own experiences, feelings, and positionality as part of the story.
Bringing the researcher out from behind the curtain.
Exactly. And using visual media too, film, photography, installations like Jean Rouch's ethnographic films. The core aim was really to challenge that traditional, often colonial, authoritative gaze and give more voice and power to the subjects, sometimes even making them co-authors.
That leads perfectly into the next topic, also from 2020. How have interpretation and presentation of data changed from classical to contemporary writing in anthropological texts? It sounds like a big shift.
A huge shift, reflecting those changing ethics and theories. The classical phase, say the 1920s to the 1950s, think Radcliffe Brown, tended towards an objective, almost scientific tone. Static descriptions, clear maps, the ethnographer mostly invisible, presenting the definitive account of a culture.
Very confident, maybe overconfident.
You could say that. Then came the writing culture era in the 1980s, heavily influenced by literary theory and post-colonial critiques. Suddenly, the writing became much more reflexive. Authors used dialogue more, employed literary devices, and explicitly discussed their own positionality, often in footnotes or introductions. The objective voice was questioned.
And where are we now, post-1990s?
Today, you see much more variety. Multi-sited narratives that follow people or processes across locations, sometimes globally, digital appendices with raw data or multimedia. A bigger emphasis on collaborative authorship, where research participants might review or co-write sections, and exploring new formats, blogs, graphic ethnographies, websites, making the research more accessible. The presentation is often more layered, acknowledged as interpretive, not just a neutral description.
Okay, let's drill down into some specific, deep methodological approaches now, starting with 2019. Discuss phenomenology as a research method in anthropological studies.
Phenomenology, that sounds philosophical. What's the core idea for an anthropologist? It is philosophical, but the application is about understanding lived experience.
Okay.
The German term is Lebenswelt, from the perspective of the person living it, before imposing external theories or explanations.
So getting inside someone's world, how do you do that?
A key concept is epoche, or blacketing. It means consciously trying to set aside your own assumptions and preconceptions to be truly open to how the other person experiences things. It focuses heavily on embodied perception, how the world is felt and perceived through the body.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Nancy Shaper Hughes used it to understand the experience of chronic hunger and maternal indifference in Brazil. Veena Das used it to grasp how people live with everyday violence in urban India. It's powerful for getting at those tacit, taken-for-granted meanings, but it usually relies on very deep engagement with a small number of people.
Okay, makes sense for deep understanding. Now let's look critically at the classic method, again, also from 2019. Evaluate participant observation in producing anthropological knowledge. We know it's central, but what are its real strengths and weaknesses?
Right, PO. Its signature contribution is holistic insight. By being there long-term, you see how different parts of life, kinship, economics, religion, connect in ways you'd miss otherwise. It also allows you to build deep rapport, which is essential for accessing those backstage realities, things people wouldn't say in a formal interview.
And it helps develop theory?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's fantastic for generating grounded theory because you're immersed in the details from which concepts emerge. Malinowski figuring out the complex Kula ring exchange system is the classic example.
Okay, sounds great. But the limitations, what are the big ones?
Well, there's the observer effect.
Yeah.
Your very presence can change what you're observing. There are significant ethical risks, blurring lines, potential for exploitation, the difficulty of leaving the field, and it's incredibly time-intensive and resource-heavy. Plus, it's hard to replicate, which is a challenge from a scientific perspective.
Yeah.
So what do you, the listener, think is the biggest ethical tightrope to walk in PO? It's a constant balancing act.
Definitely food for thought. Moving back to 2018, a definitional question. Define ethnography and present a brief history of ethnography studies.
Okay, simply put, ethnography is both the process and the product. The process is the fieldwork itself, the participant observation, interviewing, etc. The product is the written description and analysis ideally, a thick description that captures cultural context and meaning.
And the history in brief.
We've touched on it, but you have early precursors like Herodotus, then the Armchair period, followed by the Boasian Revolution, emphasizing fieldwork and cultural relativism. Then the Malinowski benchmark of long-term PO. Later, the crisis of representation in the 80s, leading to reflexive and experimental approaches. And now, the contemporary focus on multi-sited, collaborative, and often digital ethnography.
Got it. Also from 2018, focusing on depth again. How is case study method helpful in understanding a social phenomena? Explain with suitable example.
The case study method is about intense focus. You take one unit, a person, a family, an event, a village, and analyze it in great depth to shed light on broader social processes.
What's the main advantage of that intense focus?
Its strength is in revealing causal mechanisms, how things actually work in a real-world context. It captures nuance and complexity that large surveys might miss. Oscar Lewis's famous book, 5 Families, is a prime example. By studying just 5 Mexican families intensively, he developed his influential though controversial theory of the culture of poverty.
But the classic criticism is you can't generalize from one case, right?
That's the main limitation, low external validity. But the depth of understanding it provides about process is often invaluable.
Okay, zooming out slightly to 2017. Elucidate the basic characteristics of anthropological fieldwork methods. What are the defining traits?
If you had to boil it down, there may be 8 core characteristics that make anthropological fieldwork distinctive. 1. Participant observation. 2. Long duration, often a year or more. 3. Aiming for language mastery. 4. Holism, trying to see the whole picture.
Yeah.
5. Inductive design, being flexible, letting the field guide you. 6. Building rapport and high ethical awareness. 7. Using triangulation, multiple methods. 8. And reflexivity, awareness of the researcher's role.
That's a great checklist. Now we have a few more questions covering similar ground on the history. Describe the evolution of fieldwork tradition in anthropology, 2016, fieldwork tradition in anthropology, 2014, and fieldwork tradition in anthropology, 2011. Rather than repeat the whole story, maybe just highlight any slightly different angles they bring.
Sure. The 2016 one maybe emphasizes the veranda phase, that intermediate step where colonial officials did short visits but weren't fully immersed. It also notes the standardization that came with structural functionalism, like creating field manuals. The 2014 and 2011 versions really just reinforce that core trajectory. Armchair, Jatbose and Malinowski, functionalist refinement, post-colonial reflexive critiques, contemporary adaptations.
Okay, good synthesis. Let's pick out a specific tool mentioned in 2014, genealogical method.
Ah, the genealogy. This was formalized by W.H.R. Rivers early on. It's basically creating detailed family trees, but it's not just about who's related to whom. By charting kinship, descent, and marriage, you uncover the underlying social structure. Evans Pritchard used it brilliantly to map political alliances among newer lineages based on descent. It also helps track things like inheritance and succession. It's a fundamental tool for understanding social organization in many societies.
Still relevant today, I imagine.
In many contexts, absolutely. Okay, back to 2013, revisiting the case study. Discuss the relevance of case study method of data collection. Why keep using it if generalizability is limited? Its relevance remains strong because of that power to reveal causal pathways and provide holistic depth. We mentioned Lewis. Shaw's work on Naxalism is another example. It's not just academic either, it's useful for policy. Iravati Karv's detailed village studies in India, for instance, provided crucial context for planning things like irrigation projects. And you can mitigate a generalization issue somewhat by using multi-case replication, studying several cases intensively.
Right, comparing a few deep examples. Finally, let's wrap up the historical questions with 2012. What are the tools of data collection? Discuss the advantages and limitations of participant observations as a technique of data collection.
This really brings it all together. The tools are that list we ran through: interviews, genealogy, schedules, case studies, PO, etc. And the evaluation of PO always highlights that central trade-off. It's huge interviews. Advantage is capturing lived context, achieving holism, getting that insider view. The limitations: the observer effect, ethical complexities, time cost, and, compared to quantitative methods, a lack of easy replicability and potential for the researcher to get too close. Losing critical distance, sometimes called going native, though that term is problematic now.
A powerful method, but one that requires constant critical self-awareness.
Couldn't have said better myself.
Wow.
Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, that was quite a journey. We went from armchair theorists all the way to digital ethnography, hitting pretty much every major method and historical turn along the way and keeping it all in order.
We covered a lot of ground. So let's try a quick recall for you, the listener, to lock it in. Can you name the 3 absolute core features of anthropological fieldwork?
I'm thinking. Participant observation, long duration, and reflexivity.
Got it. And what's a major challenge today forcing anthropologists to rethink where they study?
That would be globalization and mobility pushing towards multi-sited research.
Exactly. And name 2 of those software tools that help manage all the qualitative data.
NVivo and atlas.ti.
Perfect. See, it sinks in. What's really fascinating, I think, is how the field adapts. New challenges, globalization, technology, pandemics. They don't necessarily replace old methods, but they push anthropologists to invent new ones or adapt existing ones.
But that core idea remains the same.
Seems so. The commitment to immersive, empathetic, long-term engagement, it just looks different in different eras.
So the big takeaway: next time you read an ethnography, maybe think beyond just the culture being described. Think about the incredible, complex, often ethically challenging journey the anthropologists took to get that story. The tools they used, the choices they made.
And maybe consider this. If you were starting research right now, in our world, with its parallel physical and digital realities, what kind of new tool or method would you invent to try and capture that complexity? Something to chew on.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.